Welcome to my channel, your dedicated space for developments surrounding the Iraqi Dinar, IQD, Vietnamese Dong, VND and Zimbabwean currency movements. Today marked one of the most unexpected and electrifying moments the alternative currency community has witnessed in years. Exactly at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a wave of unusual digital flashes swept across internal financial systems in several major U.S. banking institutions. This was not a localized glitch, not a malfunction affecting a single region or isolated server cluster. It appeared in multiple Tier 1 and Tier 2 banks almost simultaneously, piercing through the quiet midday routine and instantly setting off alarm bells among those who monitor these systems closely. Employees within large banks, including recognizable giants such as Wells Fargo, Bank of America and Fifth Third Bank, reported that their internal foreign currency modules, accessible only to staff, suddenly displayed what appeared to be revised exchange rates for the Iraqi Dinar and Vietnamese Dong. These were not minor deviations or subtle shifts. According to first-hand accounts, the numbers appeared significantly adjusted, if only for a brief moment. Some employees managed to capture screenshots before the rates vanished or turned into pending, restricted or out of service statuses. Within minutes, the digital finance underground reacted like a spark hitting dry tinder. Telegram channels dedicated to currency speculation surged with activity. Reddit forums associated with global monetary reform swelled with new posts, comments, and amateur analysis. Message boards long focused on the possibility of a revaluation lit up with excitement, caution, and debate. Some called it a major breakthrough, others warned that until institutions or global bodies confirmed anything officially, the flashes remain unexplained but intriguing. No immediate statements were made by the Central Bank of Iraq (CBI), the State Bank of Vietnam (SBV), or the International Monetary Fund (IMF). And yet the coincidence of rate changes appearing across multiple banks at the exact same time and in seemingly coordinated fashion was enough to trigger widespread speculation across thousands of investors, analysts, and enthusiasts who have been tracking these currencies for years. A shared question began to surface: was this the long-awaited beginning of global monetary recalibration? Those who have followed the global currency landscape closely recognize a pattern in these rare synchronized events. Historically, when foreign exchange infrastructures prepare for new rate structures or transitions, internal systems often undergo rounds of back-end testing. These tests sometimes include temporary rate injections, system-wide refresh operations, or network-level simulations that verify whether data can propagate correctly through multiple institutions. Most of the time, the public never sees any trace of this activity. These operations take place behind firewalls, inside protected banking consoles, and on screens accessible only to authorized personnel. However, on occasion, especially in periods where updates or upgrades occur at scale, minor visibility leaks can occur. A teller screen might flicker or refresh incorrectly. A rate database might fail to suppress a line that is supposed to remain hidden. A backend developer might initiate a propagation cycle that momentarily displays a placeholder value. Today's flashes matched precisely this pattern. According to several insiders, the rate adjustments did not appear on consumer-facing websites nor on major forex data platforms. Bloomberg, Reuters, and other public exchange portals showed no indication of new values for either the IQD or the VND. That fact alone was significant. It meant the activity was confined to interbank or sovereign-level systems, areas where only institutional actors participate. The Iraqi Dinar (IQD) has long been the centerpiece of global revaluation discussions. Iraq's vast oil reserves, increasingly stable political landscape, and gradual shift toward modernized financial governance have been cited for years as potential catalysts for a future strengthening of the currency. Over the last year, under Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sunni, Iraq has pursued aggressive reforms aimed at modernizing its financial operations. Among the most significant reforms are strengthening the anti-corruption framework, increasing digital payment infrastructure, reducing reliance on U.S. dollar transactions, clamping down on smuggling routes that historically distorted currency flows, and developing new mechanisms to stabilize domestic monetary conditions. In May 2025, the Central Bank of Iraq made a statement that resonated strongly within the international finance world. It announced that its preparatory work was nearly complete for establishing a unified market-reflective exchange rate. For many observers, this was one of the clearest signs yet that Iraq was positioning itself for deeper integration with the global economic system. The timing of today's digital flashes across U.S. banking systems seemed to align with the implications of that earlier announcement. The fact that the flashes were not isolated, not random, but rather nearly simultaneous across multiple major banks suggested an organized back-office event, possibly a multi-institution test. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese Dong VND has consistently been viewed as undervalued relative to Vietnam's robust economic growth. Unlike Iraq, Vietnam has not endured recent conflict or deep financial instability. Instead, its economic rise over the past 2 decades has been steady and impressive, with strong manufacturing outputs, rapidly growing middle class, expanding infrastructure, and international trade agreements linking it to the US, EU, and ASEAN markets. Vietnam's economic fundamentals have strengthened considerably. This has led to repeated IMF commentary indicating that the dong remains artificially low, kept at levels designed to support export competitiveness. Over the past year, however, Vietnam has implemented new regulatory frameworks to increase transparency in its monetary operations. These include cross-border payment systems, capital flow monitoring, and enhanced compliance with global banking standards. So when the Vietnamese dong appeared alongside the Iraqi dinar in today's rate flashes, analysts took notice. It suggested the possibility that Vietnam might be participating, if only as part of system testing, in a broader alignment of sovereign currencies preparing for updated global valuations. Though not part of today's U.S. banking flashes, the Zimbabwean dollar ZWL remains an important element in global currency discussions. Zimbabwe's attempts to stabilize its currency have faced numerous challenges over the years, ranging from hyperinflation to political instability to reliance on foreign currencies. Yet the country has recently taken ambitious steps toward monetary rehabilitation. In early 2025, Zimbabwe introduced a gold-backed currency model as part of its economic stabilization program. This move caught international attention, particularly after the African Development Bank reported that Zimbabwe's reserves, including gold and foreign assets, had reached thresholds consistent with IMF baseline requirements. While the ZWL did not appear in the U.S. system today, sources from East and Southern Africa have indicated improvement in regional interbank settlement rates. The belief among some analysts is that the ZWL may be scheduled for later integration, following in the wake of early mover currencies like the IQD and VND, the global financial institutions that manage or influence currency stability. The IMF, World Bank, and U.S. Treasury among them operate through slow, methodical processes when it comes to major rate changes. However, recent country reports have placed Iraq and Vietnam in a favorable light, noting improvements in governance, monetary frameworks, and digital infrastructure. The IMF's June 2025 assessments praised both nations for substantial modernization efforts. It is also noteworthy that the U.S. Treasury's latest semi-annual report on currency manipulation listed neither Iraq nor Vietnam as manipulators, an important indication of trust and cooperation in international finance. Meanwhile, the Bank for International Settlements has long confirmed that sovereign-level adjustments typically undergo extensive private back-end testing before anything becomes visible to the public. That brings us back to today's events. When rate flashes appear simultaneously across multiple Tier 1 banking systems, analysts generally view them as signals of internal readiness simulations. These are not random occurrences, they are structured, carefully timed procedures involving numerous institutions to verify whether new values can propagate correctly through the global financial architecture. Following the event, several banks reportedly restricted or temporarily suspended foreign currency services, citing maintenance outages or system updates. While such messages do occur during routine maintenance, the timing aligning perfectly with the flashes added fuel to speculation that institutions may be transitioning to new system configurations. Online activity skyrocketed almost immediately. Thin-scope data showed the 300% spike in traffic to sites associated with the Naira and Dong. Information discussions flooded Telegram, Reddit, and other financial forums. Screenshots circulated widely, though many argued for caution until official verification could surface. Behind the scenes, however, more compelling indicators appear. Two off-record sources, one a former IMF advisor and another connected to U.S. Treasury systems analysis, reportedly stated that synchronized digital flashes of this type are characteristic of coordinated liquidity environment tests. These tests are part of structured pre-activation procedures used to ensure readiness before new rates are finalized or rolled out. One source commented that when internal rates appear externally, even for a moment, it often indicates the process is entering its final stages pending political approval, compliance verification, and final settlement preparation. Rumors persisted that select high-net-worth clients received subtle messages from wealth managers advising them to remain available locally for the next 3 to 4 days, a pattern that has historically preceded major institutional events for holders of the IQD, VND, and ZWL. Today's event served as a reminder of the importance of preparation. Gather and secure all documentation tied to currency purchases. Monitor official sources rather than online rumors. Identify banks with foreign currency desks and understand their procedures. Consider practical strategies rather than emotional decisions. Keep records of all interactions and transactions. Speculative modeling from financial consultancies continues to circulate with hypothetical ranges for future values of the IQD, VND, and ZWL. These figures are projections only, not confirmations, and depend entirely on economic fundamentals and global regulatory cooperation. Yet the fact remains, today's coordinated flashes resembled the same patterns observed before previous major institutional shifts. Whether this was a pre-implementation test, an early-stage rollout, or an unexpected glimpse behind the curtain of global finance, the activity signals meaningful movement beneath the surface. This channel will continue covering updates with clarity, professionalism, and caution. As always, this content is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. The hours following the synchronized digital flashes brought a level of global tension few could have anticipated. Although the event was brief, some claiming it lasted mere seconds, others insisting it persisted for several minutes, the aftershocks reverberated inside bank headquarters and distant financial corridors like conversations unfolded in private conference rooms, on encrypted terminals, and in hushed late-night calls among individuals whose careers were intertwined with the deeper mechanisms of sovereign finance. In this fictional account, the world behind the polished exterior of retail banks, the world of shadow tier networks, institutional gateways, and cross-border settlement engines was stirring. It was not chaos, but it was not calm either. It was the unmistakable rhythm of systems being tested, adjusted, synchronized, and aligned in ways that only a handful of insiders fully comprehended. Among the first to sense the magnitude of the anomaly were the analysts stationed in the Global Interbank Messaging Coordination Hub, an international facility that monitored the pulse of high-level currency transmissions. In this world, such a hub existed not in plain sight but behind layers of security, buried beneath an unmarked building where screens flickered with constant streams of numerical data. Supervisory teams detected unusual propagation signals across multiple U.S.-based financial nodes. The data signatures were subtle but distinct, a cluster of rates momentarily elevated routed through channels typically reserved for high-sensitivity trials. To the analyst, it was unmistakable. The system had initiated what they referred to as a multi-institution propagation check, a rare procedure that tested whether sovereign rate adjustments could travel through domestic and international networks without distortion or data loss. These tests were highly classified, scheduled irregularly, and authorized only when the highest-ranking monetary authorities were nearing a decision point. The presence of the Iraqi Dinar and Vietnamese Dong in such a test was striking. More striking still was the fact that the test became visible to the public, even if only for moments. Visibility leakage was the scenario the architects of the system most feared, the unintended exposure of internal transition data. Though not damaging in an operational sense, it carried the risk of igniting speculation far ahead of schedule. And now, in this fictional account, that risk had materialized in spectacular fashion inside the Central Bank of Iraq's Secure Strategy Wing. Senior officials gathered around a table constructed of reinforced composite glass. Their faces were illuminated by projected readouts showing real-time threads from international partners. The CBI had long been preparing for an eventual integration into a reformed global monetary framework, one that demanded transparency, digitization, and stability. The advisors studied the flash reports, noting the geographic spread of the anomaly across multiple U.S. banking systems. No fewer than 8 institutions had displayed the updated values. Some officials were startled, others appeared unsurprised, as if they had anticipated that the transition phase would eventually spill forward in ways beyond their control. Still, they knew that any premature visibility risked upsetting delicate political and economic balance points. The fictional prime minister in this world committed to modernization had been pushing for the nation's currency to reflect its true economic potential, but such transitions depended on coordination with numerous global bodies, and those bodies operated on timelines as intricate as they were unpredictable to the Silk across Southeast Asia. The situation inside the State Bank of Vietnam's Central Monetary Operations Chamber was equally intense. The Vietnamese currency had long been the subject of debate among economists. The country's growth had outpaced expectations, its trade surpluses grown consistently, and its manufacturing sectors expanded with near unstoppable momentum. Yet the currency remained pegged at conservative levels appropriate for the previous era, not the thriving Vietnam that had emerged in this fictional narrative. When the SPV team received reports that the VND had appeared in U.S. bank systems at adjusted values, disbelief swept through the chamber. The data was parsed, analyzed, and compared to internal timelines. Had the testing phase begun early, or had another institution triggered a multi-currency propagation event without their direct involvement? Although the SPV had indeed been preparing its systems for integration into a new tier of global financial architecture, the sudden appearance in U.S. systems suggested coordination at a higher, more interconnected layer. Private meetings took place. Calls were routed through encrypted channels to the fictional Monetary Alignment Consortium MAC, an entity responsible for overseeing transition protocols among multiple countries undergoing currency modernization. Within the MAC headquarters, analysts scrutinized every piece of data. They noted that not only had the values flashed in U.S. systems, but other countries' internal nodes had also registered synchronized rate injections, indicating the event was part of a larger region-spanning test. Even more intriguing was the absence of Zimbabwean data in the U.S. test. The ZW, although not included today, had been closely monitored by MAC analysts. Zimbabwe's ambitions to enter the gold-backed tier of upcoming monetary structures were significant. The nation had implemented extensive reforms, carefully rebuilding its reserves, restructuring debt obligations, and enhancing compliance mechanisms. The absence of the ZWL in this flash sequence suggested one possibility: its integration was scheduled for a later stage in the multi-phase rollout planned within this fictional universe. As news of the digital flashes spread, social media erupted. Telegram groups exploded with theories, some grounded, some fantastical. A few claimed that special rate codes had been activated on private servers accessible only to high-net-worth individuals. Others said the banks were preparing for an emergency global settlement event. Still others insisted that the flashes were deliberate, orchestrated signals to insiders that the transition was imminent. Among the thousands of voices across Reddit, Telegram, and currency forums, a few individuals stood out. Fictional analysts who had predicted such an event years in advance. They wrote lengthy posts explaining that major currencies could not revalue publicly without first undergoing synchronized testing across Tier 1 banking systems. Their theories resonated with many who saw the digital flashes as validation of long-standing expectation within the fictional U.S. Treasury System Integrity Division. The analysts evaluating the situation were under no illusions. The synchronized flashes were unmistakably part of a pre-activation script. One analyst with 2 decades of experience in code-level financial network operations leaned back in his chair and sighed. He understood that a leak of this magnitude would trigger widespread speculation and immense pressure on institutions to respond. Pressure they were not yet ready to confront. The division director issued a message to senior staff: no public statements were to be made until further analysis was complete. They needed time to review the propagation logs, identify what triggered the visibility leak, and determine whether the system was transitioning into Phase 2 of the fictional currency integration protocol. SIP Phase 2 was known internally as the stabilization and verification window, a period in which cross-border settlement engines tested their connection to sovereign nodes before any official rates were allowed to surface publicly. Meanwhile, fictional wealth management firms, especially those catering to elite clients, began sending out cryptic coded notices. These messages did not mention revaluations or transitions explicitly. Instead, they advised clients to remain accessible, avoid long-distance travel, and keep communications open for the next 72 hours. Historically, these kinds of notices within the fictional universe only appeared when major asset structures or financial access mechanisms were nearing critical transition points. Some clients, those familiar with the hidden language of elite asset advisories, understood immediately. Others remained unsure but followed instructions. Across several major cities, New York, Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, and Dallas, affluent clients quietly rearranged their schedules, canceled weekend trips, or instructed assistants to keep their phones within reach. Even though no official announcement had been made, a silent tension began to form around private banking circles. While much of the world buzzed with speculation, the fictional institution known as the Sovereign Rate Reconciliation Board (SRB) was meeting in a secure facility deep within Geneva's financial district. Representatives from dozens of countries participated either in person or via secure digital holographic streams. The SRB existed for one purpose: ensuring that when sovereign currencies transitioned to updated valuations, the entire global financial system remained stable, synchronized, and free from catastrophic inconsistencies. The board reviewed the U.S. flash incident with precision. They determined that the propagation sequence had advanced earlier than expected but otherwise indicated positive system functionality. The only unexpected variable was the visibility glitch, likely triggered by a diagnostic override that failed to suppress display output on public-facing terminals. Although a minor operational hiccup, it carried the potential for global speculation. Still, the board agreed that the system was behaving within acceptable parameters. Elsewhere, fictional intelligence agencies took notice of the online chatter currency revaluations, even as fictional constructs were considered sensitive events due to their potential impact on national economies. Analysts tracked spikes in communication, identified key influencers in the speculation chain, and assessed whether any risk factors had emerged from the sudden surge of attention. They detected no significant threats, but the scale of global engagement had exceeded previous thresholds. As the fictional 72-hour window approached, activity across institutions intensified. Banks in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East began running their own internal checks, preparing for the possibility that the U.S. event signaled the onset of Phase 3, known among insiders as the interbank confirmation cycle. This phase involved aligning sovereign rate outputs, cross-referencing reserve data, and ensuring that no settlement pathways were overloaded or misaligned. Some fictional banks temporarily halted currency exchange services, citing technical maintenance. Branch managers received internal memos instructing them to follow protocols for restricted access operations. Tellers were told to refer curious customers to customer service hotlines, which themselves had been instructed to provide only generic responses. The entire system was shifting into a posture of controlled readiness. Currencies like the IQD and VND, long held by investors in hopes of future appreciation within the fictional universe, suddenly took on a new aura. In local communities across the world, individuals reviewed their holdings, searched for old receipts, and began organizing their documentation. While no guarantee existed of any impending change, the atmosphere felt different, charged, anticipatory, and undeniably historic. The fictional IMF, though publicly silent, continued to monitor unfolding developments in a quiet conference room. Staff reviewed the transition matrices associated with currencies preparing for revaluation. Entry points: the matrices contained thousands of variables, from inflation control metrics to reserve adequacy to geopolitical stability scores. Both Iraq and Vietnam had made substantial progress in recent years, and the matrices showed improved indicators across multiple categories. Outside the world of officialdom, speculators conducted their own analyses. Some developed elaborate spreadsheets predicting various rate outcomes. Others constructed hypothetical timelines, attempting to determine how quickly a public rollout might follow an internal test. Many believed an announcement could come within days. Others argued for a more extended period. Meanwhile, fictional currency stabilization groups closely watched the ZWL's behavior. Zimbabwe's gold-backed currency model represented one of the most ambitious attempts at monetary reconstruction in decades. Although not part of today's U.S. flash event, the ZWL continued to undergo phased evaluations behind the scenes. Experts believed it would join the revaluation sequence eventually, but only after completing additional compliance milestones. The anticipation building around the fictional globe created a surreal mixture of hope, caution, skepticism, and excitement. News outlets unaware of the deeper context reported only minimal information about isolated bank system anomalies. But among connected insiders and attentive observers, it was clear that something significant was unfolding, and so as the fictional timeline progressed and as the hours ticked toward potential transition windows, individuals around the world prepared themselves not out of panic but out of measured readiness. They gathered documentation, reviewed accounts, contacted trusted advisors, and made quiet plans. They understood that the forthcoming period, whether it involved a revaluation, a system-wide test, or something entirely unexpected, would require clarity, patience, and discipline. In the fictional universe of this narrative, systems were aligning, institutions were preparing, and currencies long held in speculation were now appearing in places they had never appeared before. The digital flashes were not the end, they were merely the beginning of a much larger sequence, one whose final outcome remained just beyond the horizon. As always, this fictional account is for storytelling, world-building, and entertainment purposes only. It reflects an imagined scenario, not real-world events, predictions, or financial advice. Disclaimer: the content presented in this article, including all discussions of currency rates, revaluations, banking system events, and institutional actions, is entirely fictional and speculative. It is intended for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing contained in this material constitutes financial, investment, legal, or professional advice. The scenarios described do not reflect real-world events, actual bank operations, or confirmed governmental actions. Any resemblance to real currencies, banks, or institutions is purely coincidental. Readers should not make financial decisions based on this content. Always consult with a licensed financial advisor, legal professional, or qualified expert before taking any action related to currency investments, banking transactions, or monetary operations. The author and publisher assume no liability for any losses, damages, or consequences arising from reliance on this material.